On this episode, we discuss local versus national shows, AV education, and AI. All that and more on EdTech.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
EdTech episode 106, Getting Schooled in AV. Hello, AV friends. Welcome to another episode of EdTech. We have a bit of a smaller panel than usual today. Unfortunately, our friends Rob and Ernie are unable to join us. So we have Scott Tyner. Hi, Scott.
Hey, Aaron. Nice to be here again.
Yes. And we have a very special guest, Karen Ethier from Ethier. I'm so sorry. I got that one wrong. From Roger Williams University. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you, Aaron. I really appreciate you inviting me to be on the show.
Yes. So please start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your role over there.
Yeah, sure. So Karen Ethier, she, her, hers. I'm the Director of Support Services for IT at Roger Williams University in Bristol, Rhode Island. I also have a secondary role at the university, a sort of part-time job where I also serve as a search advocacy coordinator. So I train faculty and staff to serve as equity process advisors on search committees. So I do that as well. I also do, I'm also on the board of ETC, and I'm very excited that I am going to be the president-elect of ETC beginning in July. So
excellent. Fantastic. And congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations. Because that's a, if I know ETC right, that's a 3-year commitment, right? There's the pre-presidency, the presidency, and the post-presidency. Yeah.
So I've done 2 years on the board, and now I have committed to 3 more years. Yeah. So
Okay.
It's a lot of thinking. I also contacted like other past and present presidents of ETC to talk to them about what the experience was and to find out the good, the bad, and the ugly. But ultimately, it's an organization I've been involved in since I was an entry-level tech, and has been really valuable to me and my own professional development and growth. And so I'm really looking forward to the chance to give back. And ETC, just had that name changing and a rebranding. So it's really, I think it's an exciting, critical time for the organization. So some really exciting challenges, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, we actually talked about that a little bit a couple episodes ago. And how has been the response so far to the rebrand?
The response has been incredible. From the beginning, the vote was overwhelming. I think there was a real recognition that, CCMC stood for the Consortium of College and University Media Centers. And I know I'm not the only one that when I mentioned CCMC to my CIO, his eyes would just kind of glaze over, and like, what's a media center? That doesn't sound like anything we do, So I think it really critically is letting people know sort of what the organization stands for, the people it represents, and sort of what the next chapter is. So I've heard a lot of good things, and we also are just seeing sort of an increase in interest in the organization. I've had just from my own contacts, I think we've had 4 new, members like this week, just from people that I've talked to. So I think the rebranding is really helping to kind of jumpstart all the great things that were already happening there already.
Excellent. Well, all right. We will jump into the articles that we read for this episode. The first one comes to us from AVNation, and it's the Yamaha Unified Communications to showcase at Exodus Almo E4 experience. So there's, a lot of regional shows that, they've kind of always existed, but it seems like there's more and more smaller things popping up. For you both, what is more appealing, or are you more likely to attend a local show like E4 or a big national one like Infocom?
So I think there's definitely something to be said for big shows. I have to admit that in my 20 something years in the industry, I just went to Infocom for the first time last year. It was something I had sort of actively avoided because of its size, because that kind of didn't appeal to me. But I think that there's an advantage in terms of scale with the bigger shows. So both in terms of the number of vendors that you can interact with, but also just the scale of the technology that there's sort of the space to highlight. So I think there's really something to be said for that, and also networking on such a large scale as well. But I think that the smaller shows can offer some really targeted, personalized interactions. One of the things I found to be an advantage in sort of smaller events is the ability to really spend time with vendor manufacturers and bring them problems and have them really talk through solutions and suggest like very targeted technologies and plans. So I also think that the small shows really offer that chance to build relationships between us and our vendor manufacturers, just because it's just easier to kind of have a conversation in depth, where when those booth interactions are so sort of impersonal and there's so much going on at the big shows. So I also, speaking of ETC, we've started to do some regional events. This is not really about trade shows, but about conferences. So we at Roger Williams, we just held the first ETC local or regional event and invited people sort of in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, a little bit New York. And some of all of the vendors who came to that really talked about how valuable those small events are to them, and how they really made some good connections with folks in our area, and some good leads. So I think these smaller things can be valuable both to us as customers, but also to the vendors as well.
Karen hit the nail on the head there. It's you're in some ways you're comparing apples and oranges, so it's hard to say which one's better. My take always is, the only thing I'll add is, I think that if you are struggling to get professional development or travel funds, those smaller regional ones are less expensive to go to. And so you start there, you come back to your organization, you show it provides value, and you kind of build to kind of the Infocom or the bigger shows. And I think Infocom is changing. I think that that's for the better. The Infocom show is changing, and I think it's for the better, because my first Infocom, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago, I walked around a show floor, like, what am I supposed to do here? Nobody wanted to talk to the single person from Small Bates College in Lewiston, Maine. And so the training and the professional development was valuable, but walking that show floor was not particularly valuable at that point. I do think some of that's changing, but again, if there's money issues, certainly that smaller conference, and even the ones that Karen mentioned, the smaller conferences like ETC might put on, they do have vendors there. Even if it's a conference, they have vendors there, and like she said, you can get into these conversations with them that you're never going to get in at a bigger show when they're watching their watch because they've got half an hour and they've got to go take off because they've got another appointment.
I think that's a really good point about the cost and the travel cost. And I think the smaller shows also give opportunities to people in the industry or in our offices and our staff that we wouldn't be able to get travel funds to go to Infocom. CCS just had a showcase in New Hampshire with some vendors this past week, and we were able to send one of our techs because I can get mileage money, but I can't, this isn't someone that I would be able to send with airfare and accommodations to Infocom. So that's a good point for us.
Yeah. And also, I think it could potentially be better timing wise too, because a lot of times if you're making the investment to send somebody to, say, Infocom, that's at least a 3-day period of time where they're not going to be in the office. They're not going to be able to be useful. So at least if it's a local show, they potentially could be gone for a day and then they're back in the office the next day. So from a cost standpoint, a resource standpoint, like local is really nice, and your return on investment is good. And I'm sure that the vendors would agree too that the return on investment for them is got to be pretty good, because I'd imagine the cost overall of doing a small local show is significantly less than a large trade show.
Yeah, I mean, I went to a conference 2 weeks ago, maybe last week, I can't remember at this point, and the vendors that we normally deal with are in the area already, right? Our local vendors. So really, they're just going there. They're paying for a table and setting up a table. There's no added expense. It's not like they're flying 50 people to Vegas or Orlando. So I agree, Aaron. I think that for them, it's a much less costly proposition.
Well, I mean, it definitely sounds like there is value in both. And I definitely enjoy going to the large shows because it's almost like summer camp. Like you get to see all of your friends that live all over the place that you don't normally get to see in person. So that's kind of, I think it's always the networking and the personal side of it that is almost more of a draw than that gigantic anxiety inducing show floor. It's like, where do I start?
I've been telling all my, when I've been talking to vendors for the last month or two, I'm like, I'm going to get in touch with you right before InfoComm, and I'm going to book a booth tour, because I'm not wandering around this year again, like trying to like push my way into crowded booths and get someone, to pay attention to me, as Scott said. So, I know what my projects are. I know the technologies I need to, research. So for me this year, I'm going to, try to book as many booth tours as possible and just have a more targeted, scheduled approach, because I really do feel I just wandered around like a small child last year,
Mm-hmm.
confused and lost.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. And it's those taking that approach is nice, because then you're going to hit those things that in advance you want to see. But then sometimes you end up missing out on that like small thing that you may not have noticed, but at the same time you'd probably end up hearing about it if there was something out there that was really knocking everybody's socks off. You'll hear about it and then look it up and figure it out, find out about more later. All right, well, let's move on to the next article. This one comes to us from AV Magazine. UK's largest AR/VR learning center to open at City University. What a cool and brilliant concept this was. But like, how could we, do this more at more schools with, maybe more generalized AV education in schools?
So Aaron, it's funny. I read this article. I think AR, XR, VR, they've all got a place, right? But this article kind of made me giggle, because it's the problem we have with it right now is that I don't actually know what they're doing. Like I read this article and I have no idea what this school is doing. Like, so and that's the problem. Like people talk about it, but it's hard to talk about some concrete thing that you're doing. So I think the school is immersing people in AR, VR, XR, and letting them use it and play with it to develop it. I don't know if that's really true. And I think that's very interesting. I know that in some schools, probably even larger research universities, that's actually where I've seen most of the VR or XR being used is in the research areas, as opposed to in the actual teaching and learning area, the kind of the classroom space.
How I interpreted it was essentially that they were creating a program to develop AR and VR, not necessarily for higher ed, but essentially a company partnering with the university to create a program for this and providing the tools, and then after the fact potentially offering jobs to the graduates. And that seems like that could be something that a big integrator or a manufacturer could potentially do with a school. Maybe some, something on the a smaller level, or community college potentially. I could see like an AVI SPL coming in and partnering with somebody and being like, here's this, help equip and give them the tools, and then in the end taking some of those graduates of that program and giving them some jobs, or at least just building that workforce more.
I think, kind of comes back to that like sort of age old question that comes up at my institution, which is which comes first, the tech or the pedagogy? Should we be proactively bringing tech and then sort of challenging the faculty to then create, the learning outcomes around that? Or should our work be driven by, by the pedagogy, by, what the faculty are finding valuable to be teaching to our students? And that's been a source of tension the entire time I've been at my institution, is sort of where we fall in terms of those, in terms of that innovation. This makes me think of, I was at Arizona State University, I guess, 2 weeks ago with the ETC board. We did a great tour there, and they were highlighting some technology that they have. And they had, we didn't see it, we saw some video of it. Planar has installed an LED, like sort of immersive stage kind of thing. So, with the walls and the floor are LED panels. And this is how like The Mandalorian was shot, is that all the like scenes are happening on these LED walls, and then the actors are like in this space, and it looks like, they're in the environment, but they're not. And so I guess Planar has partnered and installed this, and they showed, them being used. And I thought that was really cool, because that's a real opportunity for Planar to, see how their technology is, used in these kind of academic spaces, and then gave, the students access to that. I think this article also for me brought up what has been a conversation that's been coming up a lot lately when I'm talking to people around the country, which is about AV education in general and pathways, right? So if we interviewed, 20 people in AV, all of us came up in probably very non-traditional, there isn't a pathway really into the audiovisual industry. And, it's kind of currently based on like who gets mentored, who gets hired, who knows who, and that's led to, we continue to see a real underrepresentation of women and racially minoritized people in our field. And I think part of why that continues is that, we know there's a lot of bias in mentoring. We know that there's a lot of bias in hiring, unconscious bias. So, that serves to sort of perpetuate, who is in the industry. And I think there's some interesting work being done. George Chaco at Pace University, they're doing an AV program there. I think it might be a minor, and they have their first cohort, and I've heard some really great things about that. Christopher Hope in Boston does an internship program, and I think has some partnership with Avixa, where they're training people to get into the AV industry. But it's interesting that, every single university, right, has some sort of AV department, but not any sort of education program that, would prepare people to do that job. So,
Yeah, I've always struggled with that concept of AV education, because I struggle with what is the AV industry? I mean, it's a sales industry, it's a technology industry, it's a electronics, electric flow kind of industry. So I'm always kind of like, what would an AV curriculum look like in any type of a trade school or university or college? And um, so it's interesting. That's the first I've heard of some of those places that are starting them. So I'll be curious to see how that turns out, because I've always kind of gone towards the side of we should be bringing people into the AV industry, some from some of the other fields, the computer science fields, the even an electrician field in a community college or trade school. So I'll be really interested to see how that turns out in those other places.
I think the challenge there, I think that's what we've all, I've certainly been doing. I've been actually reaching out to computer science graduates of University of Rhode Island, and I've hired 3 of them so far. But, that really puts the impetus on us to be doing training in-house, right? And so, especially with turnover rates, what they are, I don't know if this is happening at other institutions, but with our turnover rates, there's a lot of impact on our current staff to be constantly training new people as they come in, because they may have some competencies but don't necessarily have, that full AV knowledge. Or we'll hire someone who has maybe like, some video experience, but then they come in and they don't have some critical audio or control system experience that we need, and we're sort of constantly, training. So it would be nice if there was even just an agreement about what someone in the AV industry needs to know and be able to do in order to do the job on day one.
Actually, that when you put it that way, that makes a ton of sense to me, and I think that so now I understand the problem, right? I hire somebody, even if they're an electrician or even if they're a programmer, computer science major, they still don't know what to do, and sure, I can send them for CTS, but when they're done their CTS, they're still not going to be ready to get into the field and do stuff. So where do I send somebody to train them or that's a great point.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess the possibility of courses is kind of endless, because there could be so many different facets that could be like, your major is overall like audiovisual, but then you could major in sales or minor in sales, or be on the installer track with a minor in programming, or like there's definitely lots of, I think, opportunities there that in a lot of it is stuff we just kind of pick up along the way. So like rack dressing 101, like just how to put together a proper rack, and labeling and all those things kind of could, they're useful skills that a lot of us, I think, we just sort of pick up along the way, because there wasn't really a way to learn it. And then you potentially pick up bad habits too. So if there was a way to learn it, in the best ways possible, like, I think that would be so valuable to our industry. And also have a dedicated stream into the field, since we kind of just, most of us stumble upon it. And I am very similar to Karen in that I came to higher ed AV through higher ed AV. It was my work study job as a student, and so I just never ended up leaving. And I think part of it, it's great sometimes when we can recruit from our own staff or student staff to become full-time staff members, but a lot of them came to school for completely unrelated things. And I would imagine that parents probably aren't too happy when they're like, oh, we just paid for you to go to school, you graduate with this degree, and now you're doing that? Oh, okay. That's glad our education dollars went to the right place. But I know my my family wasn't particularly pleased. Although I think in the end they were like, yeah, you probably ended up better off, because I finished with a degree in illustration. So
Sociology for me. So
right. So it's I probably ended up on the better end of it, being employed full time with benefits and stuff, as opposed to, trying to work my way through the art world as a freelancer.
I struggle with what you were just talking about because sometimes our staff will say like, oh, this student worker would be so great. Like maybe we could, hire them after they leave. And now that I'm like the age of our student workers' parents, and see everything from a parent point of view, same thing. I'm like, oh, like if my kid like went through like and I paid all that money to go to Roger Williams, and they're like, I'm gonna keep my student job like when I graduate, you know. But I don't regret it at all. I mean, I found something that I just really loved to do, and I tried to leave. I got a master's in teaching, and I left for a little bit, and was drawn right back in because it's just what I love to do, and I think a lot of us are in the field because of that, because we just got hooked and it didn't let us go.
Absolutely. Okay, so we have one last article, and this one, it comes to us from Rave Pubs at AI in Higher Ed. Scott, since you are the author, do you want to tee us up for this one?
Yeah, I have to reread it because I think ChatGPT wrote that for me. We've chatted a little bit about this in the past. I think AI is just, and we've said this so many times in technology, like it's the thing. I think AI is the thing. It is exciting and horrifying all at the same time. But I think it's one of those places where you can imagine anything. And I think about, I wrote about it in there about this idea of like this, not just a camera following you, but about this system learning from your behaviors and from your language, what is going on in the room and reacting to that, right? So a professor who walks towards the chalkboard, reaches down and picks up chalk and raises the arm to write on the board. The system knows that's what the professor is doing, so it zooms in on the board, right? There's nobody that has to manually do that. If it's a home theater, right, it learns the difference between you getting up to grab a soda out of the refrigerator and you getting up to head towards the door to leave to use the bathroom, and reacts properly to those things without ever having programmed to do that, right? It's artificial intelligence with cameras and microphones and machine learning, and it is mind-blowing, the stuff that could happen with that.
I think when I read the article, I was so wowed by just you talking about AI with the Sony units, the cameras that can auto track, pan, tilt, and zoom, and how they're basically using AI to do that by recognizing the speaker and making decisions of the movement on their own. I just hadn't thought of that as even being AI, and that was like really fascinating. And I think the possibilities that you're talking about these systems being intuitive on that level is like amazing, because if you think about like usability and accessibility, how we struggle to get our faculty to use this technology because they have to interact with it and figure that out, and imagine if like they didn't have to, but that also feels like super far away to me right now, considering I'm not going to say the name of my smart speaker because then she's going to talk to me because she's right next to me, but we call her Lexi in our house. Our Lexi is pretty stupid. Like, you know what I mean? She's not that smart. So it's hard to, kind of imagine a future where, my AI is going to be able to intuit whether I'm getting a glass of water, or going to, or leaving the room. But I think that's really, really exciting. The possibilities are really exciting.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I love the idea that like in the future, support could be a lot different of classrooms and stuff if the systems themselves were a bit more not self-aware, but like like it could self-report that there's a problem, or it could, yes, there are ways to, you look at a dashboard and you could see something's offline, but for the actual system itself to know that there's something wrong and to be able to let you know, or even if a user in the room itself is having an issue, it could make the switch for them, or it could do things that it could tell, like, oh, they're just hitting the wrong input or something like that, to make those usability things so much easier without, having to send a tech to help them or something. Like, that'd be just amazing.
That's another. I mean, what a brilliant way to use it, right? Years ago, when we started putting help buttons on our touch panels, when somebody pressed a button that says audio's not working, right? We programmed it to say, well, hold on, if audio's not working, let me go make sure it's not on mute. Let me make sure the audio input changed properly. But that was all programming we did in, right? The AI, nobody has to say there's a problem, right? The AI can go, wait a minute, this computer is playing a video. My microphones with auto echo cancellation aren't getting any audio coming out of the speakers. There's a problem here, and start to fix it, right? A lot of times I don't often think I'm very creative, and a lot of times I'm kind of like, oh, I don't really know how you'd use that box. But for AI, I'm like, oh my, there's endless possibilities of how you can do it. And I think that if I can think of them, there's going to be some really smart, creative people who have already like blown by the stuff that I'm thinking about.
Right? Yeah, I'm thinking that this is probably not as far off in the future as we think, because it seems like all of this technology is just exponentially like increasing and becoming, more and more powerful. And it seems like even in the last 4 months, like the amount that ChatGPT has changed, like I can only imagine that within the next year, how many things are going to be able to be automated or, have that intelligence kind of built into it. So it's exciting and scary.
Yeah.
But I'm cautiously optimistic. Well, all right. Karen, thank you for being on this show with us. You have been an amazing guest. How can people reach out to you if they want to?
Well, again, thank you so much for inviting me, Erin. I was so pleased when you reached out and excited to join you. I was listening to the show, and it's a great show. I love the format that you have, and it was really exciting to be part of it. You can reach me on LinkedIn, probably the easiest. Also, my email is kethier@rwu.edu. So if someone wanted to email me directly. And I will be at InfoComm this year. I'm presenting with Erin, actually on a panel with Erin, so that's exciting. And so I'm looking for people to connect with and hang out with at InfoComm. So people should reach out.
Excellent. And Scott, how about yourself?
Well, first I want to say it was great to meet Karen. I think we just heard her phone bing because I just tried to connect on LinkedIn. It was great to meet you. It was a great time. You can reach me on Twitter at @steiner, on Rave Pubs, and of course here on EdTech every month. Oh, and LinkedIn as well. If I didn't say that, I can't remember.
Oh, yeah, of course. And as for myself, you can find me on Twitter at Smirin_off_ice and on LinkedIn. And I'm pretty much, if you're a member of HETMA and on our community, I am always in there tinkering around. So, so thank you all for another fantastic episode, and hopefully you'll join us again next time.